money is a great influencer on whether or not things happen. Who is placed to solve the problem of climate change? So the insurance industry is one of the only industries that is reasonably well placed to be able to solve this problem at all, or to be able to mitigate this problem or help manage the problem for people.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Bright Founder Talk at TAMI. TAMI is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Our today's guest is Farid Tejani, who is co-founder and CTO of Yokahu. Farid, hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
We are happy to see you today, and thank you, I'm good too. Let's start our conversation with the question, who is Farid? How is to be an entrepreneur?
Good question. Okay, nice way to start. Okay, so I'm UK born national. I'm based in the UK. I was born here actually. Like very many entrepreneurs, I'm second generation immigrant to the UK. I think there's something quite powerful about being an immigrant into a new country, because it helps you develop different kinds of skills, I think, as a unit, as a person. And it's very common amongst entrepreneurs, but not exclusive, so that's fine. I developed my career in over probably now 2 decades, working in finance and technology. And specifically in green finance, in climate finance, but we'll talk a bit more about that. My degree is not in engineering.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer by training. I'm an engineer by learned skills. My first degree was in critical analysis. It's in like thinking. And economics and politics. So, and then my career was around 10 years developing software technology in finance for some large banks. And then about 10 years ago, I stopped doing that, and I started doing some more work in early stage venture, and particularly in following my passion, which was the low carbon economy and climate change, like hoping to make a difference to climate change and seeing how money can change that.
Wow, I'm surprised that you are self-learner in the engineering sphere. Yeah. So what was the motivation to change the sphere of work?
The reason I worked in technology is because I really like the way systems assemble and systems behave. When you look at complexity, when you look at behavior of lines of code, you look at behavior of components, you look at behavior of services, when they interact, they can create interesting outcomes. I decided that quite early on in my career that I was going to apply some of the skills that I had around thinking, systems thinking, and systems behavior to an area which was really growing really quickly and quite interesting for me, which was software. And so I came up not through developer route, but through the testing route. So after really doing as much as I could in that area, I was probably running projects and running programs of work. And I realized that it was really important for me to start to combine some of my passions, right? To make sure that I felt, my heart was in my work, and I continued to become, in love with my work. And so that was the chance to start to build things around climate change and around climate risk and climate problems, mainly because I was working in finance, financial technology before. And I could see how much power that the effect of money had on the ability for the world to be changed in different directions. And what I decided to do was try to use my engineering career, my financial experience, to change how money flowed in the overall system.
Let's concentrate now on your company, on Yokahu. It was 2019 when Yokahu was born. You've managed to combine fintech innovation, artificial intelligence data, and the natural catastrophe insurance markets.
Yes,
it
correct.
Sounds complicated and fascinating at the same time. How was the idea for the creation of Yokahu born?
Well, that's great. Very interesting. I think with any entrepreneurial idea, the solution isn't that you end up with is not necessarily the solution that you intended or expected at the beginning of the mission. It's a lovely story to say that every fintech or every business, every new venture starts out with the mission, and the mission never changes. It's true to an extent, but your mission should adapt and evolve as any startup to the feedback you get, but also more importantly, the extent to which you can make a difference or your hypothesis is good. So Yokahu was initially the seed of the idea was actually from my co-founder, who is from the insurance industry. He's he was a broker at the time. Developing insurance policies or insurance products and writing risk, brokering risk for big problems, particularly in the climate space, and particularly around a type of insurance called parametric. And parametric insurance is like a kind of modern innovation. It's like a smart contract because you are not insuring an asset like a house or a building or something like that. You're insuring for an event, and you agree the amount of the money that the customer or the buyer of the policy is going to get at the beginning before you write before you agree the insurance. If there's an event like a flood or a hurricane or something like that, you will get X amount of euros, depending on whatever is agreed at the beginning. And that depends, of course, on affordability and so on and so forth. The useful thing about that is that because it's a smart contract, everything happens immediately. We monitor the data and we pay out immediately, like within perhaps a few minutes or perhaps even faster. So it behaves like a smart contract. The original idea was from my co-founder, Tim, and he was writing these big policies in the insurance market. We realized that he realized that this problem could be applied in a more, let's say, a more democratic way for smaller customers if we use technology. And together we met up probably at the beginning of 2020, I think, right at the beginning of the lockdown, actually. And we started working on developing this idea for parametric across the world. And as we developed the idea, we refined and narrowed down the solution to focus exclusively on climate change and specifically climate risk problems. So the concept is like, it's actually pretty simple. Like climate risk and climate change is affecting everybody. Right now, as I'm talking, there's a huge storm outside. I don't know if you can hear it, but the wind is howling and the rain is hitting the windows. So climate change affects everybody in the world, but it doesn't affect everybody equally. So what we are doing as a project is focusing on providing insurance cover for individuals who are more affected than who are not. Now, we know that people who are more affected are people in developing countries, people who have economies that are more dependent on tourism, who are more dependent on natural resources, like, for example, beaches or hotels or restaurants or, this kind of thing. And also people who are in particular locations where natural events happen more frequently, and the infrastructure perhaps is not as good, the government infrastructure is not as good. So we imagine that most of these people are already covered by aid, but aid is not really solving the problem. And as the frequency of these problems increases, it's not possible for aid to cover. And anyway, aid takes a long time to flow. Aid can take 1 or 2 years before money is coming in. So we put in the hands of individuals the ability, and organizations, and also governments and banks, the ability to be able to cover themselves against these kinds of climate risks, climate catastrophe risks directly happening to them. And as we have developed the products and the business, we have realized that there is a huge demand for this all over the world for so many different types of weather events, that we have become on a mission to, we put ourselves on a mission to solve all of those problems for all of those markets, for micro insurance, for micro policies. Right now, nobody is able to solve that problem other than us. There are a couple of companies that will help you insure your multi-million-pound building, if you want, against a climate event, or your multi-million-pound business against business interruption, for example, if if there's a problem, and so on. But those products are not available to like everyday people, and it's everyday people that are affected. When we see that, we know that we're helping those communities and and companies and nations develop more resilience. So that journey is kind of, even the mission of that business has been an evolution, as we have understood the problem better, understood the way in which we can solve the problem better, understood the problems that we cannot solve, and also. Of course, with a small company, you're constrained resources, so you have to double down and narrow your focus in order to be able to become more successful.
Okay, so climate risk insurance can help protect individuals, small businesses, or even entire countries. And so, what is your target audience? Individuals or businesses?
Well, actually, what we do as a business, we are a B2B B2B organization. So we sell our insurance and our technology through other businesses who will then use our technology to help their customers directly. So we're what we call a B2B2C. And what that means is that we scale faster, but also we have the ability to be able to touch and understand the end consumer and the needs of the end customer. So, but it's really our customer's customer. In that situation, what that means is that our target audience is quite broad, because we focus in many countries. In some countries, we focus on brokers, insurance brokers, who already have, let's say, good relationships with consumers and customers and businesses that are buying insurance products, right? In other industries or under other markets, we are talking directly to financial institutions. For example, a mortgage lender, so a bank may offer loans to their customers, and in some of those customers may be more vulnerable to climate risk events. So we sell an insurance product as part of the mortgage product that's going into the business, going into the lender's loan. And this means that if their customer is exposed to a climate risk event, like flooding, for example, in Australia, you see a lot. You're seeing these kinds of wildfire events in the west coast of US, hurricanes in Florida. When these events happen, we know that our customer, the lender, is going to have their loan and their assets protected. So our market is mostly developing nations, but not exclusively. Our market is everybody who is affected by climate risk and is climate vulnerable, what we call climate vulnerable. The UN just published some figures this week or last week saying that 1.6 billion people are what is considered climate vulnerable. So they have a significant economic vulnerability to a climate risk event. For example, natural weather like storms, hail, fire, drought, floods, all these sorts of problems, are being accelerated and becoming more severe due to climate risk. So there's around 1.6 billion people. Billion people.
And what was the biggest doubt and concern to launch your own company?
Wow, I mean, everything is uncertain constantly with early stage venture. I've been working in developing climate risk and climate finance startups for almost 10 years now, and in the end, everything is always uncertain, because you're dealing with a construct, you're dealing with something that doesn't exist right now, and it only exists in your own head. So the idea is to translate that from your own head into the real world, and then in the real world it will make a difference. The biggest doubt is always, of course, perhaps you're not the right team to make the difference, or the solution that you have doesn't make the difference that you expect, or perhaps the market doesn't understand the problem enough. Climate risk of knowledge and understanding is really moving very, very quickly, and timing is a big factor in whether or not a business is successful. You may have the right product, you may have the right solution, you may have the right problem to solve, you may have the right technology that solves the problem, or the right solution that solves the problem, but maybe your timing is not right. Maybe the market is not ready, or maybe market is ready but they don't understand the solution that you have and it's too expensive, or perhaps, I don't know, perhaps you're often too early, right, with early stage venture. So the main challenge is always with a new venture, because you're moving into a new space, the main challenge is almost always timing.
What is the biggest challenge you faced during your path?
Probably the biggest challenge is ultimately knowing when to fail a business, know when to fail a project, when it's not working, when it's failed. And it's a difficult challenge, because when you are in an early stage venture, when you're in a startup, your job is, half the time at least, your job is to be very, very creative with how you solve problems. We're working within a period, within an environment in startups in which you have a lot of constraints and relatively few resources. So you have to be creative in how you solve a problem, but also you have to somehow be creative about how you're solving the problem. Like, you may come up with something completely different way to solve the problem, and it might be a better solution. And that creativity is like it's an artistic experience, right? It's like one in which you suspend your rational mind, and instead you use your creative side. However, when you do that, you need to develop some kind of discipline around your hypothesis to establish whether or not the creative idea is a good idea or a bad idea. And it's very difficult. I think one of the challenges, probably not necessarily like it's something that I've had to learn, but I think it's a very important skill to learn as an entrepreneur, is being able to switch from being very highly creative to being very disciplined and scientific about what the data is telling you when you run your experiment in the market. So if you have this idea that some kind of widget is going to solve people's problem, and they're going to understand what it is, and they're going to buy it from you at 100 euros each, and you're going to change the entire world, and you're going to be the next Apple. If the data is not telling you that, then you need to pay attention. Now, it's very easy to say, but of course, when you are very impassioned and very, it's your own idea, so you already have your own cognitive bias, and then you add the will, like, if only this, or if we just change this, or if we just add this, or if we just do this, it's going to work. The lean startup methodology, which is like test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. That kind of makes sense when you're iterating a product that has some kind of traction, some kind of purchase on the market. If you are at the pre-stage of that, and you're not sure whether the market is even going to understand your product or accept your product, you can't really do test and learn in a micro fashion. You have to do it in a macro fashion. And that means being very harsh on yourself if something is not working, to stop and completely change the approach. Let's say, they call it pivot, but it's not really a pivot, it's like a reboot. And that's a big challenge, because you have a lot of cognitive biases involved in that kind of process. And then when you're a team, you are combining other people's cognitive biases. For example, the sunk cost fallacy is a good example, right? People will always want to follow their idea, their problem. I think it's a lesson that I've had to learn probably, a couple of times before I get it right. And you can never tell what's going to be in the future. So it's never easy to be able to say, this is working, this is not working. But I think the more experienced you are, the more disciplined you are about, saving resources or time or whatever. And then also, like, when something is working, you need to double down, just double down on it, double down. And that's probably, the biggest challenge is, like, you're never sure which direction you're going to go, right? Is it going to be like double down, or is it going to be abandon, and reboot?
Does global climate change make a direct impact on your industry?
Yes, I think what's interesting is, like, what you're seeing at COP27 is very interesting at the moment, right? Like, the question is, like, who is placed to solve the problem of climate change? The difficulty is, like, no one organization is tasked with or able to solve this problem, right? Now, what we're doing is not going to inherently reduce climate risk or climate change directly, because we are not in the place of financing green projects. Well, not directly anyway. Though we do siphon, we do pass up some of our profits to certain causes. Nevertheless, the point is this: there are only a certain number of organizations and institutions that are either influential, big enough, powerful enough to be able to get together and solve this problem, or at least even mitigate the risk for climate change. As I said at the beginning, money is a great influencer on whether or not things happen. So our job is, like, to try to help the financial services industry to be able to solve or mitigate or address or manage these problems globally. And that's why we're a global network in our by design as a business, because these problems are everywhere and they're popping up, and the capital to solve the problem is everywhere, and that's popping up. So our job is to kind of connect it internationally. The way we've done that is by being licensed as a cover holder at Lloyd's of London, which gives us access to 90 markets already, and our system already can pay out in 170 countries worldwide. So wherever you are, you pretty much can get access to a product from us. The question about whether or not who can solve the problem is, like, well, there are only a certain number of people that are interested in solving this problem, and most of the banks are not interested in solving problems. They're interested in financing projects which they don't really care, for the most part, whether or not they're climate risk or not. They increase climate risk or not. However, the insurance industry is uniquely positioned because it's been looking at these problems, natural catastrophe events, weather events, disasters caused by these kinds of events, for maybe 100, maybe even longer years with data. So the insurance industry is one of the only industries that is reasonably well placed to be able to solve this problem at all, or to be able to mitigate this problem or help manage the problem for people. Climate risk affects us in one sense. The more events there are, it's the bigger, it's effectively a bigger market, but there are more payouts for us, right? So as a business, we just get more throughput, more volume, but we don't wish for more climate events, of course, right? What we wish for is, like, an environment in which everybody is equally affected, and some of the cost of climate risks are in effect transferred to institutions and organizations and people and governments and nations and so on in areas in which climate risk is not such a direct effect. So rather than giving money to the IMF or giving money to let's say, I don't know, aid agencies, for example, which has been the traditional route, like, let's say the West gives money to an aid agency and then that distributes money to Haiti after a hurricane what, the new future is that this money is effectively redistributed through insurance-based products on insurance markets, which provides for a bigger footprint of cover. And it means that the commercial sector, the private sector can get involved with solving a problem. And so, and like I say, the insurance industry is one of the only industries that's been dealing with this problem for quite some time already. And what I think, we feel like they've been waiting for is like these micro insurance products that allow them to access these new markets, or these markets where people really didn't have any solutions, right? People, who are, I don't know, working in a retail or hotel or hospitality or something like that in a developing nation doesn't have access to these products until now.
I believe that you guys are doing brilliant things, and even I can say must-have things for our future. So thank you. And we are moving to the last question, but I can say that it's the most thought-provoking question. What piece of advice can you give to other founders or young startuppers?
Interesting. Wow. I mean, I suppose the first one is sharpen your tools, because and carry your tools with you. Like know your skills and know your tools, and know what you are good at and be good at them, because then you can make a difference. Like nobody needs a mediocre engineer, okay? Nobody needs a mediocre salesperson or a mediocre finance person, right? Doesn't matter what area you work in, you need to be good, right? So the first one is sharpen your tools. And then the second one, I think, is probably be conscious that you alone cannot solve a problem. Everything is a team effort and requires a high degree of collaboration, and you're collaborating with people outside of your area of expertise. So in this scenario, like, start to get good at understanding what is the, what does good look like in another area, right? So then when you meet somebody and you say, okay, well, look, I like you, you're a good, I don't know, salesperson, or a good potential CEO, or a good, business person. How do I know? Like, how do I know that you are good in your area? And how do you know that I am good in my area? And then, and then in that case, you will find smart people which will help you identify interesting problems that you feel passionate about, interesting problems to work on. Like, not the idea that every problem is solved right now is so far from the truth, right? There are infinite number of problems to solve, and not everybody is here to to build a unicorn business out of some thing. But if you feel passionately about something, then often that can be its own reward. It's not necessarily the case that every project you do has to be commercially successful. I mean, I've done many projects which I have just carried on doing just because I feel passionately about it. I'm just not making any money, but it's not the point, right? And the reward is not financial. So understand what is your motivation, and like I said, keep your tools sharp. Understand how to appreciate other people's skills, and what does good look like in their domain, and then always be on the lookout. Always be on the lookout for a problem, or an idea, or a thought. Like, nurture your thinking to establish, to see whether or not there's an idea there, or that could be explored, or should you just move on? And the best people I know are thinking about 20, 30 different situational problems, or 20, 30 different opportunities, maybe any given time, like all sorted in their heads, all being able to kind of like be organized, because some of them are require more time, more thinking, more information, data, so on and so forth. So yeah, don't don't think that you just have to solve one problem at a time.
Okay, thank you for this motivation for people who are watching us, and for me as well.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I wish you the best.